In business today, three things to know. First, it's a manic merger Monday. Large pharmas tie the knot, and we'll let you know who else is getting together and why. Then, the House goes bust. Casinos are failing in Atlantic City. Is it because the free market is attracting gamblers elsewhere? And Africa technology rising. How many new tech startups are coming from the world's fastest growing economies in Africa? Arise Exchange starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. A busy Monday on Wall Street where mergers, bank settlements, and a record push for the Dow top the news. First, Merger Monday. But the tie-up news does not involve companies getting together for just pure business reasons. Instead, they are searching for better tax treatment. Chicago-based AbbVie is finalizing its purchase of London-based Shire for $53 billion as part of what is known as a tax aversion deal. The taxes in the UK, better than they are here in the U.S. And the Pittsburgh-based generic drug maker Mylan will buy the specialty generics business of Abbott Labs for about $5.3 billion and then incorporate in the Netherlands, because the Netherlands has better taxes than Pittsburgh and the U.S. The headquarters will stay in Pittsburgh, but the company will pay Dutch taxes on its international earnings. In the oil sector, Denver-based Whiting Petroleum is buying Denver-based Kodiak for nearly $4 billion in stock. The combined company will produce 107,000 barrels of oil a day. We think that company is staying in Colorado. We'll run down what is driving these mergers in a moment. The markets also welcome news from Citigroup, the bank reporting better than expected earnings for the second quarter of $3.93 billion, or $1.24 a share. Citigroup will need the money because it's also reported to have a settlement with the government over sales of faulty mortgage-backed securities. Citigroup will pay a $7 million fine. Here is the U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder.
The bank's misconduct was egregious. And under the terms of this settlement, the bank has admitted to its misdeeds in great detail. The bank's activities shattered lives and livelihoods throughout the country and also around the world. They contributed mightily to the financial crisis that devastated our economy in 2008.
The total $7 billion settlement package represents about half of Citigroup's $13.1 billion profit last year. Taking a look at the markets, the Dow did trade into record territory Monday before pulling back just a little bit. Here are the final numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 111 points to 17,055. The S&P 500 up 953 to 1977.10. And the NASDAQ up 2493 to 4440.42. Looking at commodities, gold closing down 30.30 and oil up to 101.12 cents a barrel. So why are companies getting together now? Thomas Kirchner is portfolio manager with Quaker Event Arbitrage Fund. Arise Exchange, and thank you
for having me.
Okay, so we start the show saying that at least these companies they are getting together over tax policy. If you could walk a little about why it makes sense. The question is, does that make business sense for these companies? Is that a good reason to merge?
Well, it is definitely a good reason to merge, because if you look at what has happened over the last few years, companies have improved in efficiency. They have cut costs wherever they could. They laid off everybody they can lay off. So what can you do now? Well, you go down your income statement, and the last item before your net income is taxes. And so if you want to improve your net income, you lower your taxes.
So you lower your tax bill.
That's basically what you can, the last thing you can do to improve your efficiency. And that's why we are seeing so many tax-driven deals. And you also have to remember that the U.S. is the country with the highest tax rate in the developed world.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you that because if you want U.S. corporations to pay taxes, how much this is counterproductive, isn't it? How much are we losing in taxes because the companies are going to the Netherlands or going to Ireland or going even to the UK? When you hear that Europe has lower corporate taxes than the United States, it makes you kind of think.
And that's exactly what the rationale was in the United Kingdom when they recently lowered the tax rate. The idea was to attract a lot of companies. But remember, there are also other things that make companies go abroad. It's not just tax-driven. Sometimes it's also regulatory-driven. Because if you look at some of the Swiss companies, like Tyco, they went to Switzerland to save taxes. Now they're stuck in Switzerland. The Swiss changed their legislation about paying the top-performing employees. You now have salary caps on top performers. So what are they doing now? They're moving to England, or rather Ireland, in order to get around these salary caps.
And when we're talking about moving, we're talking about a change of address and filing corporate paperwork, aren't we?
Well, what they're really doing is they're using M&A to do it. So you take an Irish company, mergers and acquisitions. You take an Irish company that is an existing business, a real business, not just some shell. It's a real business. They buy the U.S. company, and then the U.S. company, which is a little bit bigger, effectively becomes an Irish company.
The Mylon CEO was on CNBC today saying this was not just about a tax deal, because it sounds like if you're an American CEO, you sort of want to run away from this issue. You kind of want to do the deal anyway, but you certainly don't want to admit that you're doing it to avoid U.S. taxes.
Well, I think there are probably other reasons as well, and I think it also has to do with regulations. So we've seen an increase in general regulations, such regulatory burden on U.S. companies. And the U.S. is one of the most bureaucratic countries in the world now, and we've seen these massive fines that have been levied on some of the European banks as a result of the complicated
We saw $7 billion on Citigroup today.
And even Citigroup.
Though it says something when
though
Citigroup
I doubt Citigroup would leave the U.S.
And they had a pretty good day on Wall Street today after you pay a $7 billion fine. That says something about a company. Why, in general, are we seeing a lot of mergers and acquisitions activity right now?
Well, as I said, it really has to do with the efficiencies. So there's the tax aspect, but then there's also the aspect that you have improved your business to the extent that you can. There's not a lot of growth in the economy, and we've actually been expecting a pickup in M&A activity for several years now because of the huge cash balances that companies have on their balance sheet. But now it has really gotten to the point that to improve efficiency, you have to increase scale. So you're buying up somebody else to get to a larger scale and lower your costs that way.
We're seeing a lot of this in the pharmaceutical industries. Are there other sectors that you're looking at that we're starting to see a pickup in M&A?
Well, tech is also very active in M&A and permanently active. Pharmaceuticals are also always active. That's just the way the industry structure works in pharmaceuticals. I think we'll see more industrials as well. We'll see chemicals, some activity in chemicals as well.
And pharmaceuticals, I imagine some of it is intellectual property. The best way to get new drugs is maybe to buy the guy next door.
Exactly, yes. And that has to do with industry structure. So large pharma today is essentially a regulatory and distribution business. Innovation always happens in small startups. And big pharma realized many years ago they're no good at innovation.
So they let somebody else start it up, and then they just buy them.
Exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
That's good for the small startup, certainly. Thomas Kirchner, portfolio manager with Quaker Event Arbitrage Fund. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Israel's war with Hamas is leading to more than casualties on the ground. It is putting companies that do business with Israel in the position of choosing sides. Many of those companies are bucking calls for an Israeli boycott. Arise Washington Bureau Chief James Blue has more now from our D.C. Bureau. And James, I understand there is some breaking news out of the Middle East right now that Egypt is working on a deal to have a ceasefire.
Yeah, there's news that Egypt has put forward a ceasefire proposal that the Israeli Security Cabinet is really seriously considering. They will meet early tomorrow morning, and the hope is that by 2 a.m. Our time tonight, that a ceasefire deal may be in place. And so that is sort of the latest out of Israel.
Any details on what the ceasefire is? Because the last ceasefire lasted, 30 minutes or so.
Well, really what has happened is Hamas wanted to show the world that it still had missiles to fire onto Israel. They've done that. Israel has really wanted to show the world and show Hamas that it can go into Gaza and do what it wants. It's done that. And so there is some sense that this ceasefire may have a chance. The fact that the Israeli cabinet agreed to meet immediately is an indication that they're taking it seriously. They've stopped talking. They've canceled all interviews. So there is hope that this might be a way forward. Secretary Kerry is in the region, likely tomorrow, so things are picking up.
Okay, and let's talk about the bigger economic toll here. How has this latest conflict really impacted Israel? We see a lot of news about some companies standing up for Israel and some companies being pressured by the anti-Israel folks to boycott them. What is your sense of what you're hearing about the toll in Israel on this?
Well, Israel has had quite a good economic period. For the past 2 years, there's been a lot of unrest throughout the Arab Middle East, and I think a lot of investment and a lot of development has happened in Israel. Just last week, there was a suggestion that the growth rate was actually going to improve up to 3.3%, which is better than it did last year. I think a number of companies are trying to sort of have it both ways, recognizing that there's a safety issue involved. Do you move your employees out? Do you keep them there? but recognizing that Israel is one of the most stable economies in the region. And so it's really necessary to be in Israel and to use it as a development center, use it as a technology center. And so the people I've spoken to, they are very hopeful that a ceasefire will come and that this will sort of create a path toward peace. And
isn't there a sense, though, and isn't it accurate, that when you have sort of these two sides going at it, the economy that takes the hardest hit is in Gaza?
Gaza is absolutely taking a much harder hit. This is the Ramadan period. And so a lot of the sort of people in Gaza, they do their shopping, they do a number of things. This is where a lot of businesses make most of their money. Gaza is a pretty depressed place on a good day. Now that there are bombs falling, you know, it's a real bad place. The unemployment rate is just over 25%. And if you imagine, Gaza is twice the size of Washington, D.C. And, you know, there are human shields that Hamas have put together to try to protect and to try to prevent Israel from bombing the missile sites. And what is happening is regular people are being bombed to bits because they have been placed in really bad situations by Hamas.
Well, and one person not suffering economically, there is a picture circulating around online of the head of Hamas in his private jet. And, you know, you wonder whether that information filters down to the folks in Gaza.
Well, clearly, Hamas, as you probably know, is controlled. The leadership is outside of Gaza. They're in Syria. And Hamas certainly has lots of money. I think the real sort of victims on all sides are the people who are the victims of these bombs, Palestinian bombs, Israeli bombs. And certainly, you know, one of the big struggles, rebuilding Gaza will be very, very difficult because they have no cement.
That's very interesting. And so your general sense is that the Israeli economy has weathered this, but they probably can't weather it for too much longer.
They probably can't weather it for too much longer, but they have been the safe haven for the region, which has been in turmoil for, you know, almost 2 years now. And, you know, clearly the fact that there is a ceasefire proposal that the Israeli government is certainly trying to review is a good sign.
Okay. James Blue in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Andrew, just one last note.
Tonight,
President Obama here at the White House will be sponsoring an iftar, the traditional break of fast that is celebrated in Ramadan by Muslims around the world.
Is he expected to say anything, do you know?
There's been some controversy. Some people have said he should cancel the iftar because, in solidarity with the people in Gaza, there will certainly be something out of the iftar, but it won't be on camera. It will just be a statement.
Okay. James Blue in Washington. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, the loser takes all in Atlantic City, how competition is killing the legendary gambling spot. You're watching Arise Exchange.
If I was building my own network, it would be for the people, by the people. It would be very diverse. It would be with every culture you can think of.
If I was to start my own news network, it would reflect positive and negative within the continents and the countries around the world.
I think that I would be more looking towards young people.
If I were to build my own news network, it would look like New York City. Old, young, fresh, hip, classic.
If I was to build my own news network, I would just have people from all over who are very connected and diverse.
If I was to build my own news network, my own world network, I would love a correspondent in every country, every location, every city. I mean, it's kind of unrealistic, but how cool would it be to get local stories from the impoverished country, the impoverished city that we don't know about?
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back to Arise Exchange. Time now for our business ticker, stories making headlines across the nation. Volkswagen announcing it will build a new SUV line in the U.S. The German automaker said it was working on its first 7-passenger sports utility vehicle out of its factory in Tennessee. which would create about 2,000 additional jobs. The company will also invest $600 million to expand its factory and add a new research center. The new SUV model is scheduled to hit the showroom by the end of 2016. A high-level female executive at Yahoo is being sued by another woman for alleged sexual harassment. A software engineer claims that Maria Zhang made her perform sex acts in exchange for enhancing her job prospects. The woman, Nan Shi, also claims Yahoo's Human Resources Department did not act when she complained. A representative for Yahoo strongly denies the allegations. Got a rash? There may be an app responsible for that, or at least one of the devices you spend hours on. A new report attributes allergic reactions such as severe rashes to the nickel in some of our favorite high-tech gadgets like smartphones and laptops. Statistics show a quarter of children have nickel allergies. That's up from 17% 10 years ago. Nickel is a common ingredient in other household items like eyeglasses and hand creams. And speaking of mobile devices, if you thought getting your kids to put down their phones was hard enough, try the cyclists at the Tour de France. That's right. Italian cyclist Luca Paolini was caught by a sports photographer on his phone going 40 miles an hour during the Tour de France. This is no doubt against the rules, not safe driving there, which the organizers of the tour reminded everyone after Paolini's picture caught fire on Twitter. Luckily, no one was hurt. And in his defense, Paolini said he'd forgotten that his phone was in his pocket and was just turning it off. It's a little suspicious. Not getting a text from a girlfriend or anything like that. Visitors planning a trip to Atlantic City will have one less casino to visit. Trump Plaza casinos reportedly closing as soon as September. That would cost AC a third of its casinos. It follows news that Showboat Casino will close at the end of August, and high-end Revel Casino will also likely close after running out of cash. And others are said to be on the brink. So what is happening to a legendary American vacation spot? Joining us now from Atlantic City is Israel Posner, Executive Director for the Lloyd D. Levinson Institute of Gaming, Hospitality, and Tourism. Israel, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Happy to be with you.
Explain to us how, if you're the casino, you're the house, you could possibly go bankrupt.
Well, that's a very good question, because, of course, most people think the house always wins. But let's get some perspective on that. As you know, since 1978, Atlantic City has been the East Coast hub of gaming and has had a continuous growth of gaming for the first 28, 29 years of that industry, since from the late 70s till about 2006, when you saw the growth of about 13 casinos all around Atlantic City. As you know, New York City, eastern Pennsylvania has 7 of them, Delaware, Maryland. There's been tremendous growth. So during those years that Atlantic City had a monopoly, of course, if you wanted to gamble, you got to go to Atlantic City. In 2014, roll it forward, Atlantic City has about 45%, a little bit less than half of the casinos in this mid-Atlantic region, and roughly now gets about 45% of that casino market. And they're all under pressure.
So, Israel, this is not about less people gambling. This is about competition, isn't it? It's market competition. There are casinos that have popped up in the state next door, Pennsylvania. If you're in New York, of course, you can go to Connecticut.
Yeah, and Aqueduct Racetrack.
Aqueduct
Aqueduct is one of the largest grossing casinos in the United States. It doesn't have table games yet, but Aqueduct is very popular in New York City and Long Island.
And there's going to be about 7 to 10 casinos in New York State soon in upstate New York, I understand.
Yeah, that is a different market. I mean, those licenses will be available. They'll be rolling out over the next several years. We'll see who wins those licenses or how many companies apply for those licenses. But in the immediate surround, when I say immediate surround, I'm talking about a tank full of gas around Atlantic City. It's about a $6 billion market. That's roughly how it is, and it's fairly flat. So what's happening is that the very lowest performers in that market, and if you take a look at the performances of Trump Plaza, you look at also Showboat, and in the case of Revel as well, you're looking at the lowest performers of the Atlantic City market.
Israel, how much is this a failure on the state of New Jersey? Because compare Atlantic City to Las Vegas. They're been around about the same amount of time or so. Las Vegas clearly is not necessarily just thought of as a gambling destination, but Atlantic City, other than having the saltwater taffy, I don't know what else you do there.
Well, that's a fair question, and I think the answer to that lies in the numbers. What I do is I study the numbers. If you look at Atlantic City, just 5 years ago, when the casino cash registers were not as robust as they were years before, the non-gaming revenue, by that I mean entertainment, retail, food and beverage, was about half of what it is right now. In merely 5 years, the non-casino gaming part of the city grew from about 10% to about 20% where it is right now. If you take a look at Las Vegas Strip, for example, many people are surprised to learn that about two-thirds of Las Vegas is non-gaming revenue. Atlantic City is clearly moving in that direction. It had a very good run as casino dominant. I think what you'll see in the near term is that while casino gaming won't be the dominant part of Atlantic City, it will continue to be significant. I mean, $2.5 billion is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, absolutely, but they're going to clearly need to come up with a different strategy to attract people there. Finally, I just want to ask you about internet gaming, and is that a threat to casinos, or are the majority of people go to casinos there for the whole experience?
Short answer, that is a very insignificant part of what has been going on in the last several months in Atlantic City. And secondly, those gamblers that have been playing on the internet in New Jersey are basically new incremental business. They're people who have not been in the Atlantic City database of customers. So it's really an opportunity to grow the database and possibly new visitors to Atlantic City.
Okay, Israel, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Coming up, our favorite person of the day. You're watching Arise Exchange.
If I was building my own news network, first thing I think I'd want high-quality reporters, very educated, intelligent people.
Hello, I'm Francesca Maxime.
I'm Julian Phillips.
I'm Wendy Gillette.
I'm Sophia Song Hai. I'm Gary Anthony Ramsey. Thank you for joining us here in New York City.
I would like to see more people of color represented in high positions in media.
We've got world-class journalists, veteran journalists who have been in this industry for decades, not just in front of the camera, but behind the scenes as well.
People need to understand the problems that are going on in the community are much closer than we actually think they are.
Kayla Phillips is one of the shoppers who is suing Barney's, and she is here with her attorney. What is it that you want from them?
Not to judge every African-American person that comes in your store.
Time now for our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person or people who grabbed our attention and not for the right reasons. Today, our favorite people are a couple of police officers in Florida who may believe that to serve and protect stops when they attend their Klan meetings. The FBI discovered that two officers from the Fruitland Park Police Department may be members of the local KKK. Deputy Police Chief David Borst and Corporal George Honeywell were fingered as Klansmen. When Borst was confronted by the police chief, he denied the allegation but quit on the spot. Honeywell remains on the force, but the police chief is asking for permission to fire him. Now, being a member of the Klan is not illegal, but the police department publicly frowns upon it, apparently. With that said, it appears to happen more frequently in Fruitland Park that the force would like to admit to. Several years ago, another cop had to resign after pictures surfaced of him wearing the KKK gown and hoods while holding his gun. And so David Borst and George Honeywell are our favorite people of the day. Maybe they could get a job doing security at the Klan rallies. Coming up, how Africa is building its own Silicon Valley. You're watching Arise Exchange.
Looking at mainstream news stations where only you have a very small minority of people of color being newscasters and actually having prominent roles in the media.
In a newsroom in the United States, maybe 10% of decision makers come from communities of diversity. That's not right.
Well, diversity is important because the more complete the news is, the more accurate a picture you're getting of the world, and the more you can form an accurate opinion of things.
The vision here is not just to tell the main stories of the day, but to tell the news that other organizations don't tell, and tell it in a way that people like me, people that look like me, that look like you, are interested in.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Will the next Silicon Valley be Silicon Africa? The governments of Ghana and Kenya are spending billions of dollars to build tech capitals in their own countries, and companies such as Google, Microsoft, and IBM are committing money, resources, and even moving some operations to the continent. Jake Bright is a contributor for the Financial Times and the Atlantic Quartz, and joins us now to talk more about the African tech boom. The Silicon Africa is your phrase that I saw in one of your articles, and I'm wondering, what kind of technology are we starting to see develop in these countries? Kenya, of course, has been very big on mobile banking, for example, when people don't have bank accounts. So it appears that maybe the technology matches the needs of the people.
Yeah, that was kind of phase two. Was any conversation of tech in Africa kind of starts in Kenya, starts with mobile money innovation through M-Pesa. And then some of the things that put African tech on the map were starting to develop apps to solve problems, infrastructure problems. Don't have a banking system, develop mobile money, don't have a lot of doctors. There were some apps that came out for maternal health. There were some for agriculture. But now African tech has started to dichotomize a little bit. And you have a new story brewing that is more kind of reminiscent of American tech, in that there are startups, there are venture capital funds, and there are some ventures that are now looking to make money, and investors are looking to make money.
Yeah, how much of this development is organic based, and is there financial support for these companies?
Most of African tech's origins, I would say, was very grassroots, very lean, and it's starting to have different characteristics in different regions. So Kenya, I would say, is very much dominated by that grassroots narrative, although that's changing with these tech megacities that they want to build. When you get into Nigeria, Nigeria is starting to shape up more like an American tech market, in that they have startups, and most of these startups are not social ventures. They're full-on commercial ventures that are getting money from American private equity funds, and they want to solve commercial problems and make money and make profit.
Is the infrastructure, though, in place? Because we hear about, for example, in Nigeria, of the power problems, and in a lot of the countries, just simple utility problems. So is there an infrastructure that supports technology creation? And you mentioned these tech hubs in these cities.
Well, that's a major issue, and you have these tech entrepreneurs, many of whom left ventures in the U.S. to start stuff in Africa. Very capable people. They could start, their own tech ventures here, and they're doing this in countries that have very questionable ICT infrastructure. So they're trying to run these 21st century companies. But for example, one company I interviewed, this Nigerian company called Afrinali, when I asked him the same question you just asked me, he put the phone in the background and said, "Do you hear that? That's the $3,000 a month we pay for generators to run our venture." So, the movement is there, the entrepreneurs are there, and now the African governments are starting to try to catch up and give some infrastructure to this movement.
And on the flip side, do the people have the resources to now buy these apps? I do know that mobile devices is surging in Africa, while traditional, for example, television is on the downswing.
Well, that's going to be a huge market, and one venture I can name is Solophone, which is a Nigerian-based startup that's trying to create Africa's first smartphone. And the real question is price point. The first phone they have retails for about $70. And whoever can capture that market and create a smartphone market and create these platforms to also deliver all these other things will do very well. But price point is particular.
Less than 30 seconds left. If Google, Microsoft, are they getting into this a little late in the game, do you think?
Google and Microsoft are starting to support things like tech competitions, some of the incubation hub competitions. But you have some firms like IBM who recently put down $100 million and started an African research lab there, and are now moving Watson. They've created Watson, and they're moving into Lucy, to solve Africa's problems. And eventually, what they think is solving these problems that used to be in the development world will be a commercial venture for them in Africa's future.
Okay, Jake Bright, we'll see you in Washington, D.C. in less than a month or so for the conference down there.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a Rise Exchange for today. Let's take a quick look at the final numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average briefly peaked into record territory today and then pulled back, though still up triple digits. I'm Andrew Schmertz. We'll see you tomorrow on a Rise Exchange.